Hey there, friends. Imagine this. You're sitting on your porch on a crisp autumn evening in small-town America, the kind where the leaves turn fiery red and gold, and the air smells like pumpkin spice from the neighbor's kitchen. But deep down, there's a shadow that never quite leaves you, a ghost from decades ago that whispers in the quiet moments. That's the story of Susan, a 71-year-old woman who's lived through hell and back, still carrying the weight of a violent marriage from her youth. It haunts her every day, but it's also what made her the fierce, loving grandma she is now. Stick with me. This isn't just a tale. It's a reminder of resilience, the kind that echoes in so many American homes. Pause for a breath, soft, empathetic tone. Let me take you back to where it all started. Susan grew up in the heart of the Midwest, in a little town in Iowa called Cedar Rapids. You know the place, wide open cornfields stretching as far as the eye can see, Friday night football games under the lights, and summers spent at the county fair with cotton candy sticking to your fingers. It was the 1970s, a time when bell-bottoms were in. Disco was blasting on the radio, and folks still believed in the American dream. A steady job, a white picket fence, and a family to call your own. Susan was just 18 when she met him. Let's call him Jack, though that's not his real name. He was charming, with that easy smile and a pickup truck that roared down Main Street. He worked at the local factory, the one that made tractor parts, and he promised her the world. Oh, how young love can blind you. Susan's parents were hardworking folks, her dad a farmer who rose with the sun, her mom baking pies for church potlucks. They raised her to be kind, to trust in people, and to build a life like theirs. So, when Jack swept her off her feet at a summer dance, with Stayin' Alive by the Bee Gees playing in the background, she thought she'd hit the jackpot. They got married quick, in a simple ceremony at the local Methodist church, with wildflowers from the fields as her bouquet. Friends and family cheered, toasting with lemonade because times were tight. Little did she know, that dream was about to turn into a nightmare. Voice softens, a hint of sadness. The first signs were subtle, like storm clouds gathering on a clear day. Jack had a temper, you see. It started with words sharp, cutting remarks about her cooking or how she dressed. "You're not trying hard enough," he'd say, his voice low and menacing over dinner at their tiny kitchen table, the one with the checkered cloth her mom had sewn. Susan brushed it off at first. She was raised to believe marriage meant sticking it out, through thick and thin. Divorce, that was for Hollywood stars, not folks in Iowa. But then came the nights when his anger boiled over. After a long shift at the factory, he'd come home reeking of sweat and frustration, blaming the world and her for everything wrong. I remember talking to Susan about this over coffee at her cozy living room in her current home in Des Moines. She's got this warm setup, now knickknacks from garage sales, photos of her grandkids on the mantle, and a rocking chair by the window where she watches the neighborhood kids play kickball. But when she recalls those early years, her eyes well up. "I was so scared," she told me, her voice trembling like leaves in the wind. He'd grab my arm too hard, leave bruises I had to hide under long sleeves, even in the sweltering Iowa summer. It wasn't just physical. It was the constant walking on eggshells, the fear that one wrong word could set him off. Holidays were the worst. Thanksgiving dinners, where she'd force a smile while serving turkey and mashed potatoes, all while nursing a hidden ache. Slight pause, building emotion. As the years dragged on, 5 long ones in that marriage, Susan felt herself fatting. She was 23 by then, but she looked older, worn down like an old barn after too many storms. Work became her escape. She took a job at a diner downtown, flipping burgers and pouring coffee for truckers passing through on I-80. The tips were meager, but the chatter with regulars kept her sane. "Honey, you okay?" one older lady would ask, eyeing the way Susan winced when reaching for the pie display. Susan would nod, plaster on that Midwestern politeness, and say, "Just fine, ma'am." More coffee. Inside, though, she was crumbling. Nights alone in their rundown trailer, she'd stare at the ceiling, listening to the crickets outside, wondering if this was all life had for her. The American dream. It felt like a cruel joke. But here's where the story takes a turn, folks. The emotional low that led to her breaking point. One winter night in 1978, with snow blanketing the fields like a white quilt, things escalated. Jack came home late from the bar, the kind where guys nursed beers and griped about the economy. Susan had their dinner-ready meatloaf and green beans, her specialty. But he wasn't hungry for food. He was hungry for a fight. Words turned to shouts, shouts to shoves. She ended up on the floor, her world spinning, the taste of blood in her mouth. In that moment, huddled against the cold linoleum, she thought of her future. "What if we have kids?" she whispered to herself. What kind of life would that be? It was the wake-up call she needed. No graphic details here, friends. Abuse is a dark shadow we don't glorify. But know this, it shattered her spirit, yet somehow ignited a spark. Voice rises with hope. Susan didn't leave right away. Leaving isn't easy, especially back then when women's shelters were few and far between, and folks whispered about broken homes. But she started planning. She saved her diner tips in a coffee can hidden under the sink, squirreling away dollars like a squirrel with nuts for winter. She confided in her best friend, Mary, who lived next door and had seen the bruises. "You deserve better, Sue," Mary said over fence chats while hanging laundry. Together, they plotted her escape. One spring morning in 1979, with the tulips blooming in the yard, Susan packed a single suitcase, her wedding dress left behind like a bad memory, and drove away in her old Chevy Nova. She headed to her parents' farm, tears streaming as the radio played American Pie by Don McLean, singing about the day the music died. For her, it was the day her old life ended and a new one began. Oh, the relief mixed with terror. Arriving at her folks' place, the familiar scent of hay and homemade bread wrapped around her like a hug. Her mom didn't say a word at first, just pulled her into an embrace that said everything. "We're here for you, darlin'," her dad grunted, not one for emotions, but showing it through actions, like fixing up a room for her in the attic Susan filed for divorce, a process that dragged like molasses in January, with court dates in the county seat where judges still wore stern expressions. Jack fought it, of course, angry letters, threats that made her heart race. But with her family's support and a kind lawyer from the local bar association, she got through it. Free at last, but the scars, they lingered like ghosts in an old house. Transition with nostalgia. Fast forward a bit. Susan rebuilt her life piece by piece, the American way, hard work and grit. She moved to Des Moines for a fresh start, got a job at a bank as a teller, counting bills and chatting with customers about the Hawkeyes football team. Weekends were for simple joys, picnics in the park with a basket of fried chicken and coleslaw, or drives along the Mississippi River, watching barges float by. She met a good man later, Tom, a quiet accountant who loved fishing and treated her like gold. They married in 1985 in a backyard ceremony with fireflies dancing at dusk. Together, they had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, who grew up playing Little League baseball and riding bikes down suburban streets. But the past, it never fully let go. Susan would have nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, Tom's arms around her whispering, "It's okay, hun, you're safe now." Therapy helped back then, it was taboo, but she found a counselor through her church, talking through the pain like unraveling a knotted yarn. "Why me?" she'd ask. "What did I do wrong?" The answer, nothing. Abuse isn't about the victim, it's the abuser's demon. Susan learned that slowly, like thawing after a long winter. Now at 71, Susan's life is a tapestry of highs and lows. She retired from the bank years ago, spends her days volunteering at the local food pantry, packing boxes of canned goods and fresh produce for families in need. "Gives me purpose," she says, with a smile that crinkles her eyes. Her kids are grown, her son a teacher in Chicago, her daughter a nurse right here in Iowa. But the real joy, her grandkids. There's little Emma, just 3 years old, with curly hair and a laugh that lights up the room like 4th of July fireworks. Susan dotes on her, pushing her on the swing set in the backyard, reading Dr. Seuss books by the fireplace on rainy days. "Grandma, tell me a story," Emma says, and Susan spins tales of brave princesses who saved themselves, not the haunted ones from her past. Yet the haunting remains. On quiet evenings, when the grandkids are asleep and Tom's watching the Cubs game on TV, Susan sits with her tea, staring out at the stars. Memories flood back, the fear, the isolation, the what-ifs. "It shaped me," she admits, "made me stronger, but oh, the cost." She's part of a support group now, older women sharing stories over coffee and donuts at the community center. They talk about how domestic violence was swept under the rug back in the day, how society expected women to endure. "Things are better now," Susan says hopefully, "with hotlines and awareness. But we can't forget. Building to emotional high. Let me share a moment that brings it all home. Last summer, Susan took Emma to the Iowa State Fair, the one with butter cows and deep-fried everything on a stick. They wandered the Midway, Emma's tiny hand in hers, munching on corn dogs and watching the Ferris wheel spin against the blue sky. A loud noise from a game booth startled Susan, a bang like a door slamming. For a split second, she was back in that trailer, heart pounding. But then Emma tugged her sleeve. "Look, Grandma, ponies." And just like that, the present pulled her back. It's those contrasts, the pain of yesterday clashing with the joy of today, that make her story so real, so American. We all have shadows, but we chase the light. Friends, Susan's journey isn't unique. Millions of women and men too, across this country, have walked similar paths. From the bustling streets of New York to the quiet ranches of Texas, abuse hides in plain sight. But her story is one of hope. She didn't let it define her. She rose above, like an eagle soaring over the Rockies. She taught her kids to respect, to communicate, to never raise a hand in anger. And now, with Emma, she's breaking the cycle, one bedtime story at a time. Conclusion, reflective tone. As we wrap this up, think about your own life. Maybe you've got a Susan in your family, or perhaps you've been there yourself. Reach out, there's help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-790-97233, available 24/7. No judgment, just support. Susan's message: don't stay silent. Life's too short for chains. She's living proof that from the ashes of pain, beauty can bloom. Like a Midwest sunrise after a storm, painting the sky in pinks and oranges, reminding us tomorrow's always possible. Thanks for listening, folks. If this touched you, hit that like button, subscribe for more real stories, and share with someone who needs it. Stay strong, America. Until next time.